Hello everyone, it's Richard here from UK Versus. So doing a bit of a video for the channel today, just going over a whole bunch of cards that you should be, I think, considering, thinking about when it comes to building your decks for the upcoming national season. I sort of went through everything and just picked out randomly cards I wanted to talk about and happened to come to a nice round 50, which was quite useful for me. So obviously there's quite a lot to talk about here, so some of these will be just a quick hitter because, they're sort of obvious ones people sort of know about already sort of when it comes to the meta. But there's some more that are, I think a bit more interesting, might be going into a bit more detail. But yeah, just a list of cards here. Obviously, people have got like deck lists and, things to consider when it comes to national season. Like, for example, go check out Brody One and his channel. He's done a big old series of sort of example deck lists with a lot of the top meta characters. But rather than talking about characters and stuff, I wanted to just sort of go around individual cards and sort of strategies and stuff and things to consider when you're building your deck in terms of what is going to be out there, answers to maybe things you're doing, what answers you might need to things your opponent's doing. But yeah, just generally go over, like I say, cards to consider when it comes to your deck building. So first off is probably one of the bigger ones, combined firepower here. It's still good, right? It's still one of those sort of pillars of the format in terms of those sort of casino style decks. Obviously it lost some in terms of losing Risky, but the card's still really good. Rodan and other sort of death characters, Evil and Void have maybe fallen by the wayside a little bit. But certainly other death characters can still run that package. It's still very good, and it's still a card that can just kill you out of nowhere and just provides a whole ton of value. So, graveyard hate, as it were, it still has value when it comes into these decks. I don't think it's necessarily going to be as prevalent as it was, but it's still something to consider. So next up we got Spear and Shield. I put this on there solely for Harry, one of my locals, because he loves this card. It's not particularly great, but it is a cool little tech piece. If you are a momentum hungry deck, that one mid breaker one and getting to snap it into your momentum is kind of cool. It's still not very good. Sorry, Harry, but I just threw you a bone and put it on the list. Airy Smiles. I think there's a lot of high attack still in the format. A lot of the ones people are playing. So whether that is looking at things like Burt 2, Pony, Battle Aura Release is still a big card in the format. Electric Moth, Lethal Slash. There's still a lot of really good high attack. So having this is like a learning the standards from hand to block with, and then make them play something else and sort of hopefully break up those strings. I think it's still a really powerful defensive option to have. Obviously, the symbols aren't great in terms of like the good symbol basically doesn't exist at the moment, but there's certainly stuff you can be doing on air and all to consider Airy Smiles within your list. I think it's still very, very good. Heroes Upbringing. There are plenty of characters where turning them off is very powerful. So again, one to consider. So whether that is, say, like a Burt 2 or like an Emir, like turning off an Emir after their second attack, and so just meaning the rest of their string isn't lethal anymore, and buying that turn I think is going to be very, very good. Again, turning Burt off so he doesn't get to sort of just string you out and kill you on a turn. It's very niche and very narrow where this card is good, but when it's good, it's going to be very good. So again, a very good sideboard option to consider for certain matchups if those ones are tricky for you. And maybe even something like a Mimic, right? Just turning off their ability to use their assets as foundations, I think might be quite good into those sort of matchups. So yeah, certainly one to consider if you're on their symbols. Showdown is still very, very good. Again, for the same reasons, Airy Smiles is good in terms of like high attack still being a very key part of the format. The Showdown is still very good. And not only that, the cancel on the action card, we see a lot of really good actions. Probably more the next two, I think, are the ones you maybe want to cancel on anything. But just having that ability to cancel an action, I think, is a nice bit of tech there with this. And yeah, just having that ability to block, even half block sometimes, just commit two of their board down and can be very, very powerful if you can run this card. So again, always been a very strong option. City Rampage. I know this is a card me and Brett have gone back and forth on in terms of I think this card is overrated. I think it's good. I think it's solid. Brett thinks it's ban worthy, which I think is insane. I think there's a lot of City Rampage decks out there in terms of probably the main one being like a Godzilla. But, you know, certainly you can like play City Rampage Toga 3. Mimic's been jamming City Rampage. We've seen that happen. So there's plenty of these ones going around. I'm not convinced that the card is amazing. I think it is solid. I think it is good. But sometimes I just think, well, if you have a checker 3 on this, it's miserable. Or sometimes you just draw a City Rampage and like 1 or 2 attacks, in which point, well, you know, why do we really need the City Rampage? And I think it's solid, but yeah, I'm not sold on it being as good as people think it is. But it's certainly going to be there and a presence in the format. And yeah, just being able to say, like I say, cancel it with a showdown and clog their card pool and not have it do the thing, I think is going to be very good. But yeah, so again, it's just one to consider, and I think is going to be all over the place in terms of like, you know, deck lists when it comes to Nationals. Our next one, Runaway, I think is lost a lot of stock when people were playing the 4-check tribal and Smiling Time was a big thing because, you know, sure, I ran away your big 10 diff throw, right? I still take 10. Like, what's that doing? But that isn't the meta anymore. Sure, people I think are still going to be playing, you know, maybe to an extent that 4-check tribal stuff, but it seems to have fallen by the wayside quite a lot to the point where Runaway is now a good card, especially when people are stacking loads of damage with combined firepowers or, you know, Lord knows what else, or like a Godzilla, for example. And just being able to say, I'll take printed and you stuff your card pool. I don't need to worry about sort of blocking. I just check this on a 5. Again, tell Bert to stop attacking and just clog. You know, again, similar reasons to like Airy Smiles. It's just a really, really nice defensive piece, but one that doesn't care about any speed they're putting on. Just says, no, I break up what you're doing. Again, I think is very good. And very much a piece you should be considering for whether that's main deck or sideboard on these symbols. And I think you probably expect it everywhere, maybe out of the Chaos symbol, like those decks, whether that's Mimic or whether that's Godzilla. I think Runaway is going to be a key part of the defense of those decks. So certainly something to think about going into internationals. Next one. So Decay Awakened isn't really Decay Awakened. This is more stage, sort of a placeholder for people blowing up the stages, right? And something to consider for certainly characters that really want to, like an Emir that wants to get to that 9 to flip and things like that. I think there's a lot of ways at the moment of people just nuking people's entire stages, whether that is the Godzilla form, whether that's Bert 2 getting to flip, whether that is Mimic playing the 12 diff or any other decks, but I think Mimic's sort of been jamming that recently. I'm just blowing up all the stages. So again, something that you might need some protection for, or to again consider not overextending into something like this. And you know, it wouldn't surprise me if sometimes you might get caught out by the actual card Decay Awakened, but it's not really been sort of a presence. But yeah, this is like a placeholder for that effect. And something to, like I say, to think about, where I think Godzilla will be one of the more represented decks, and having that as a button he can always sort of press certainly could influence all your deck choices when it comes to thinking about things like an Emir going into Nationals. We then move on to some assets. So Nox Flask, probably don't need to say too much about this. You know, it's a proven part of the meta and just how good it is. I love Nox Flask so much. Even if you're not getting any extra value off this and it's just you're doing it for what it says on the printed card, it's very good. But then there's so many ways of triggering value out of this, whether that is doing like, the sort of combined firepower casino stuff, something like, the decks that want to cycle, things like that. There's so many things that you can do with this card, and just having that as a +3 -3, it's just so very powerful on a 1 diff asset, even with that 2 mid block as well. Like, it's never a bad card to have. So always something I'd try and jam at least 2 copies on these symbols. It's just so good. VME, we probably don't need to say too much about VME anymore. Like, everyone knows what this card does and how good it is. That infinity symbol and how sort of almost free sometimes generate momentum is at the moment. It is something that everyone's going to be packing to an extent. So yeah, it's just, again, one of those things to consider, especially when you think about maybe considering a Mirio, right? Well, VME sort of neuters Mirio's main kind of draw, so that's why you don't really see Mirio running around anymore. Team Dr. Ichigaki. So this is on its own, and also sort of a little bit of a placeholder for a few other cards like this, like Tattered Cape. Just ways of stopping when you're trying to do the busted thing and your opponent has the interaction to stop you do the busted thing. This is the way to stop their interaction, So just when you are almost a little bit all in on a plan of some sort, having answers like Tattered Cape, Dr. Ichigaki, just as ways of telling them no, I think is very important sometimes. So again, a card very much worth considering. Trigger is a little bit of a placeholder. Obviously, Trigger is pretty much only a Mimic card, but this is almost like a placeholder just for assets in general, right? Assets are an important part, and you'll see there's obviously the 4 other ones on this list, but there's other assets I could have put in here that people are playing and using, whether that's be like your battle arenas and things like that. So I think ways of dealing with assets are almost at an all-time premium. When you look at things like Knots Blast, VME, Cape, even and then looking at things like Trigger and Mimic, who I think will be a key player in the format. It's just so very, very good to have those answers, and I think you do need them. And just ways of having an answer to an asset, some of which on my list when it comes later. But like I said, I think assets are very good right now. There's so many good ones, and just having a way to answer them, I think, is going to be important. Again, Cape, a pretty ubiquitous defensive piece on these symbols. We see a lot of, again, sort of a little bit of a placeholder for just those attack yeets, or, just ways of sort of nuking an attack out when it's like, well, I can't deal with this anymore, or there's too many buttons I don't want you to be pressing, so just get it gone. Cape being one of the cleaner ways of doing that, but then you've got things like, obviously, like Decoy Duplicate, to an extent, sort of Broken Psyche, things like that. But just having those big resets, or just those attack deletes, I think is, again, an important defensive piece to have access to. So yeah, Cape's a good one, and again, one of those reasons to have answers to assets. So then we move on to our attacks. So Besiege. Besiege is such a good card. I love it so much on the sort of fire attuned symbol. Like, it is just like this 3 mid 4 on a 3 diff, almost little unassuming. But that blitz text that says they have to play a bad block to block it, the fact that it's got some deadlock on it, and if you've got any way of putting damage on it, this becomes such a punishing attack, especially on the 3 diff. Yeah, it's so good, and again, a card I will jam on symbol whenever I can, because it just does so much. It's just so tricky to interact with, and sort of almost feels a little free. But yeah, again, something to consider and have access to those block mods. And certainly when you're going into decks on this symbol, just think, well, are they playing the Besiege or not, and do I need to hold this 3 mid block or whatever? Lethal Slash, I love Lethal Slash. I've only sort of fallen in love with it recently. I've only been playing it recently, but this card's so good. Again, it's a fairly unassuming stat line of a 3-high 4, but it always draws a card. It always clears itself, which I think is really, really good. It's only a 4 diff. It's got a nice 1 mid block. It does check a 2, but I think it is worth it for this. Like, if you ever line up that turn where you hit, like, go to lethal slash into lethal slash into lethal slash, like, they're just gonna melt. So, again, just cheating progressive is always one of those most sort of mode broken things you can do in this game. So, if you can stomach the 2, if you got the cojones, lethal slash is really good. Again, I think you sort of almost always do need to be able to maybe put a bit of damage on this, but yeah, again, you'll see this probably out of like the Abert 2s, probably Pony, but yeah, I think lethal slash is very good. Fadgen Flurry is again a little sort of placeholder-ish for I think I've almost got 2 actually doing this, and so sort of Phantom Threat comes under that as well a bit in terms of those sort of one-hit kill type decks. So whether that's like a Deku 2 or something, that's not Deku 2, Deku 6. But yeah, part of that, I'm just going to put everything into this one attack, and it's like a 30 for 30, and you need to deal with it. So again, that's where those sort of attack deletes and resets and stuff come in. There are going to be a certain amount of decks that are trying to do this sort of, I'm just going to kill you in one attack thing. So again, just have those answers for that, because they might not be everywhere, but certainly something you can certainly run into. Mist of Despair, I think, obviously, the sort of poster child for this would be Ymir, right? I think Ymir is going to be one of those pillars of the format, and just having that there. But I think there are other decks that can be using this, so probably the next most obvious one would be like an Overhaul. I think there's a chance he sort of creeps back into the meta a little. Even Toga 1, you could consider running this on. But yeah, I think Mixed is very good. Again, it's another one of those high attacks, so having those showdowns, Airy Smiles, I think, becomes very important. Like, imagine Airy Smilesing this and just say, well, that, you don't get your response and then you need to play something else. Like, again, it's just very, very good. So yeah, just again, consideration for those sort of, I'm going to play lots and cheat lots of aggressive sort of style decks. Try Gravity Beam. Try Gravity Beam, when it's good, it's great, right? Again, you need to be sort of doing that string thing, but sort of again, shout out to Harry, my local. He didn't beat me up with Try Gravity Beam. So just one of those things of sometimes you need to block. Sometimes you want to sort of hold blocks and only necessarily block when it's going to kill you, or you're just trying to sculpt a hand. You're saving that attack, and just one of those things of like, well, sometimes you need to just block early, because otherwise that one card you're holding and you're going to block with when you need to is just going to get ripped by a Try Gravity Beam. So block and save that damage early. A very, very strong option in those sort of combined firepower decks. And decks like Ghidorah, who maybe again fallen by the wayside a little bit, but I think there'll be some representation at Nationals. We've then got sort of 2 cards, I think, sort of representing the similar thing. So in Absorbed Energy, Spirit Strike, and Instant Shining Flash, and that's just sort of Momentum Hate. I think Momentum Hate again is become a lot more valuable in terms of decks like Godzilla. Again, I think I would not be surprised if at, say, all 3 Nats, Godzilla was the most registered deck. Playing that and that sort of chaos, good stuff, 5 diffs, sometimes playing City Rampage. It's just all over the place, and having answers to the momentum that they really want and need to do their stuff, I think is really good. So, again, cards like Absorbed Energy, Spirit Strike, and Instant Shining Flash as nice, clean answers to their momentum, I think are important. And obviously, there are other ways of dealing with momentum. So I think having some sort of answer in your deck, I think, is a nice thing to have. Excuse me. Beast Summoning. one of those other cards where having some amount of discard hate can be useful. Like if you can do a Be Something loop, you do just kill someone, right? I mean, it's a pretty cracked card and probably shouldn't have necessarily been reprinted back into the format. There aren't a huge amount of decks that can get away with playing this, but people like Biako or Pony just doing that Be Something loop and just killing you out of nowhere. Again, something to consider. But yeah, Be Something's just it's again, if you can play it, it's crazy. George Hammer, just a little, almost like a placeholder for just sort of throws. I think having some amount of throw hate, I think, will be important. There's a lot of these decks, whether that's people like Amir or someone, or whether that is like a recovery girl and stuff, just running around with like just making these big throws. Having some amount of ways of dealing with them is always nice and important. So whether that's getting things like face shield and stuff, but just having ways of answering these throws and just that are just piling on a bunch of damage, saying even if you half block, you still take an 8. Attack Titan's Haymaker, one of the best cards printed recently. It's so good. It's just such a value engine of stun 2, similar to obviously the previous Haymaker. It's not as good, but it is very good. Like that Blitz ability isn't nothing, right? They have to block with an attack, so if they want to block it, they have to spend an attack pretty much. Having that stun 2, and even if always having that ability to say like, oh, if you block it, I don't get the momentum, but I do get this foundation, which is just like a 3 damage extra foundation on your board, which is again always nice. So yeah, just very much a value piece that again on anyone running the fire symbol is probably packing 2 to 4 copies of, like usually 2 to 3, but there's a reason why I think it's the most expensive, at least ultra rare, out of Attack on Titan 2. Luna Ring is a really nice asset answer that I think you should consider, and also consider if you are playing key assets. Again, to an extent, sort of Kraken down here sort of comes under that as our ways of interacting with assets. I think Kraken's the better card. Luna Ring is a better way of dealing with the assets. Just because it permanently removes it, right? It just destroys it off the board. Obviously on different symbols. On air, you can conceivably run both if you really want to hate on assets. But again, there's some of the nicer ways of dealing with the assets on the opponent's board. Then we go on to a Black Abyss, which similar to, again, you got Deception Dagger that falls under that same sort of piece, really, of the weapon package still exists. The weapon package is still very good, whether that is on Toga 3 or maybe someone like a Wolfwood. Again, they both got that chaos symbol. Again, someone could be running, whether that's like a City Rampage weapon package or something on those lines. Whether that's like even like a Death Arms, right? Again, that weapon package is still very, very good, still very strong. He's lost a little bit of popularity recently, but Deception Dagger is still an awesome card. Black Abyss is still really, really good. They're both very good. Again, whether that's like maybe on even like a Godzilla weapons, I don't know if people have been doing that, but we then got Dragon Strike, a very strong card, even outside of Dragon Mummy, whose name escapes me, Ryukyu. Again, just that targeted snipe, similar to so Chimera Kraken sort of bridges the gap almost between these two. Chimera Kraken sort of freezes one, this obviously flips it. But just having those options on your attacks to snipe their key pieces on their board. So when if you're playing against these sorts of cards, you need to think about, well, if you're reliant on that one key piece on the board to answer what they're doing, well, they may very well just have that answer to it on their first attack, whether that's, like, say, through a Dragon Strike or whether that's through a Vast Hybrid, right? So again, they're both two very strong pieces of just answering the best stuff on your board. Arm of the Wolf, again, just sort of almost a placeholder. And that sort of comes along, I guess, a little bit with, actually, I'll go through that a bit more later, but just chaos good stuff, man. Like, and just sort of doing a momentum stuff and dumping loads of momentum, making these huge bombs sometimes. It's still here. It's still really good. Again, whether that's City Rampage or not, whether that's Godzilla or not, but just like the chaos good stuff decks still exist, and they're still really good, and they're still going to be everywhere at Nationals. So, you know, you need those resets, speed hate, just to block these things. Like I said, that momentum hate. I think those chaos good stuff decks are just going to be one of the more represented decks at the national styles level. Phantom Threat, we sort of talked about a bit when it came to the Fajin Flurry. Again, I don't think this is necessarily even a Mirio card anymore. This is sort of part of that one-hit kill style of deck. I think even I've seen some other non-Deku 6 doing Phantom Threat things. But again, generally part of the, I'm just going to pile lots of stats into this one attack and then wham you for $1 million. Focus Attack. I think Funny Punch has come back a little bit. Obviously, Rodan can run this under all, I think, quite well with things like Dragon Strike. With obviously the new attack out of solo leveling. I think you can play that under that because I think that's absorbs energy, Spirit Strike, double Jumbo Fist, Big Fist Bash, like that whole kind of Kendo mid package, getting to a bunch of speed in it because you're Rodan, and obviously having defense and sort of check hacking and stuff built in. So I think that, Rodan probably runs the Funny Punch line the best, but certainly even like a Paul Phoenix can run the Funny Punch lineup. So again, that all mids thing, it's predictable. People see it coming a mile away. Sometimes it doesn't matter when Funny Punch just gets you for 15, so something to consider. Colossus Swat, again, one of my favourite cards. If Haymaker's like the best card out of AOT2, Colossus Swat might be my favourite card out of AOT2. Just that sort of lightning rod effect of building those 2 free ones and continuing your string, it being a low, having that powerful as like a momentum out. It's got a high block, not a great high block, but it's got a high block on it in a high attack meta. And when people are sort of gunning for high attacks, it being a low is nice. And just giving you those 2 extra resources to string out on your turn, whether using those 2 resources to either cheeky build to 9 when they're not expecting it under a character like Bert 2, or whether that's like under Hanji and having those 2 free resources to blow up and ready Hanji. There's loads of things you can do with that on your turn. And again, not a terrible stats, 5 low 5. It is that 6 diff, so checking a 3 isn't great, but even if you check a 3 on this, you're getting effectively a rebate of 2 for the turn. So again, a very strong card, and one you should consider. Our next one is probably one of the key pillars of the format, probably alongside the next one in terms of like the 2 attacks. So they're just going to be everywhere. And again, part of that chaos good stuff package of Determine Advance and Walk the Dog. Determine Advance, there's a reason that this has shot up to $1 bajillion, right, on TCG Player, and people are paying it. It is a mid, but it is a 6 mid 6, and they can't interact with those stats. So at the minimum, you're getting that. Obviously, the Light Godzilla still gets to put damage on it. It snaps you that free momentum. So again, Godzilla just says, okay, I'll play this on the 6, or a 5, I guess, if they're playing City Rampage. Stat that momentum, use that momentum, whether that's to EX this thing or to make my next check better, or powerful 3 the Walk the Dog that's coming next, and really punishes decks like those sort of defensive squishy 7-handers sometimes, like a Rodan, like an Emir, where they can't interact with the speed on this. which is where when we'll see on the foundations that there'll be a key piece that I think both those decks should be running just to specifically just for determined advance. But even outside of those sort of almost more chaos good stuff like Godzilla, I think Mimic has been running this again because Mimic wants that momentum. So again, determined advance I think again is one of those cards going to be all over the place at Nationals, and you either need to be playing it or having an answer for it, or maybe both, right? And Walk the Dog, possibly the best attack in the format. I don't know what would be, but this is certainly one of the ones for consideration. Again, everyone knows what Walk the Dog does now. It's just that 6/6 powerful 3 draw a card stun one that's actually a 4 diff really. Tra-la-la. And if you ever get multiples, it's just game over. It just kills people, man. And it doesn't even have a particularly bad block. A 2-low block isn't even a particularly bad one, right? Just having that way to spend all that momentum you're generating for free on Chaos. It's even got that weapon symbol for decks like a Toga. Yeah. I mean, I love the card and hate the card by equal amounts. But, yeah. Again, obviously, there's an extent to sort of gunning for the highs with things like Airy Smiles and Showdown. But then sometimes the lows get you with the Walk the Dog and maybe even like a Colossus Swat. So, foundations. So, Desperate Plea, I think is a really nice one. So, some people have been trying to cheat in things like Cerritos with this or doing stuff like that. I just think it's Manly Passionate, right? Manly Passionate was always like a really solid played card. I think it sort of justifies the 4 here because clearing your blocking progressive and building, and whether that's like face up or face down. Obviously, Manly Passionate can only do foundations. This one says even if I've blocked with an attack or an action or something, I can just then build that face down and go plus on value. So again, just a really strong foundation. High value target sort of does 2 things, right? Again, it's that almost like commit for -2 speed style foundation of this just counts for 2, so it's just that bit of extra defense. But again, the value of this card I think has gone up a lot with those which one to nuke the world type effects, whether that's things like let's say Godzilla or Burt 2 or what have you. Just saying, actually, I can prevent something from being destroyed, I think is very strong. And again, the value of that is it's a lot higher value for FNAF than it was before. So certainly something that I think should be probably considered a lot more than it was before. Duplas, someone's going to do the dupla thing. They're going to meme with it, and they're probably going to get you. Probably not something to worry about too much. Because someone needs to go out of the way of getting a bajillion of these, but someone's going to do the dupla thing, whether that's like on Recovery Girl or someone, and they're going to, turn 5 of these sideways for 25 damage and have a wonderful time doing it and go, 2 and 5 or something. But those 2 wins are going to be worth it. But again, I don't think it's necessarily a real thing, but maybe I'm completely wrong. And actually the dupla strategy is bonkers if you can get 20 of them. But we'll see. Loss of Consciousness is a bit of a placeholder for that casino package. There's lots of those really good foundations that you sort of casino into, whether that's this or the +2 damagey ones or +2 to my next damage ones. This, I think, almost being the best one, just sealing their key piece when they don't expect it. Even without risky, the casino package exists. There are characters that can still run it, whether that is someone like a Hanji or whoever. Like, it's still good, it still exists, so be prepared to get free damage out of nowhere or DR out of nowhere or have your best pieces sealed out of nowhere, because that is just going to happen sometimes in those matchups. Feral Shriek, again, it's a little bit of a placeholder for those discard decks, so things like a Pony, Burt 2, Paul Phoenix, that all use these I discard stuff for value. So there's a little bit of that casino side of it adjacent here. But there's obviously the other ones that you can discard, whether that's like a Wish Hard or the one from set 2 with Deku's face on it. Enemies necessary, that's the one. Or again, all the other sort of discard, thought, and effect. Again, I think that package is pretty strong. You're obviously playing a certain amount of sort of blank foundations, but you get a lot of value from doing so. So, again, something to consider. Weapon Clash, we know how good Weapon Clash is. Just ramps you, DRs people. It's still going to be everywhere. It's still really good. Vast Strength. The Ryuki form on this doesn't matter. What this is response remove. Determine Advance doesn't do the Determine Advance thing. Like, there are obviously other effects this can, this can deal with, but this is one of the cleaner answers that those life decks and all decks, i.e. Ymir, Rodan, have to answer a Determine Advance. Or otherwise, Determine Advance just kills them because it's too fast. And even if they block the Determine Advance, they have to spend too many resources, and therefore the rest of the attacks kill them. So it stops the static because it removes it, and it stops them snagging momentum, so they can't, build up to doing later stuff, and lets you interact with that speed and block it cheapy. Again, the Ryuki form doesn't matter. It's still really good in those symbols, and you still should be considering Vast Strength, probably in the main deck. At worst in the sideboard, but I think those decks that are going to really struggle against something like a Determined Advance should be main deck in this card. I think it's one of the cleaner answers to it. And even when you aren't playing against Determined Advance, there are still good things you can do with this, right? There are still good attacks that this is a nice clean answer to. So again, stocks of this card should have gone up in people's mind and should be playing it, whether that's between main and side. Incredible Display is still incredible. Again, there's still plenty of responses that you want to be able to cancel. Maybe like a Vast Strength or a Runaway or whoever knows what. There's so many good things this gets to cancel. And the fallback of I block with one of my good foundations, I then pick it back up and I can block again. It is incredible, and I think on Symbol you should be playing probably at least 2 copies. Like, it's just it does so very much, and just having access to cancels and effectively repeatable cancels is just very, very good. New training method. There's so many stuff we want to be able to cheat in. This is sort of primarily seen a lot of play on the life symbol, but sometimes on the earth symbol, whether that's on things like Ymir and Pony and maybe Recovery Girl. But again, new training method, just being able to build harder and faster than your opponent and pick up extra resources and blocks from your checks, again, is very, very good. Enjoy it while it's still here. I think everyone's going to miss new training method when it rotates out with Critical Role. Just a very strong piece that the more I play with it, the more I love new training method. Evading Copy, one of the best answers you can have to some of the one-kit kill decks, because they play with things like Ichigaki or Cape, or not Cape, Tattered Cape, and things to answer your answers, so cancels and stuff. Evading Copy is the one that says, actually, this can't be cancelled because it's the static. And, obviously nothing filthier than blocking with an Evading Copy and then picking it back up with Incredible Display. Again, a really solid sideboard answer to remove it down to printed when they put a bajillion stats on something, whether that's like an Arm of the Wolf that they've, sent to the moon. Evading Copy being one of those cleaner answers that sometimes you have to build and it's blank because, who's playing Mono in 2025. But again, very much a sideboard piece that maybe you could sneak one of into the main board, but one of those cleaner answers to those big old bomb decks. Sacrifice for the Cause is a card I've only really been playing with recently and have fallen head over heels for, and very much underrated or sort of almost ignored when it originally came out. just in those decks, especially where you're playing with things like a Feral Shriek and stuff, and having that discard fodder, like probably the two sort of key places of this would be Pony and Bert too. But I think you could consider it elsewhere, of just a way of using those extra resources for extra damage, and that response sacrifice. After someone tries to use a broken psyche or another damage reset or any sort of DR, you just get to say no, and sometimes that just kills them. So a very, very strong card. And yeah, it's just you're never necessarily unhappy seeing multiples, but just having a way of using those extra resources in your hand when you're just trying to kill someone just to put extra damage on stuff, very strong. Condescending, again, a little bit of a placeholder for just resets, yeets. They're really important in the format. There's so many good attacks that you just want to be able to blank out and just say, I don't want to deal with any more. So you just need access to them. Enormous Axe, part of that sort of casino, blow up my stage kind of package, where Enormous Axe is like letting the more scrammy resource positive for that. And also sometimes it just puts a bunch of damage on a throw or a big old attack. So again, a very strong part of those decks. Stopping for breakfast. Again, we've sort of seen it above. There's lots of those really important actions. Obviously, the symbols here are a bit of out of favor, but if you can fit in stopping breakfast, I think it's very strong. Like whether that's cancelling a city rampage or a runaway or a showdown, cancels are good, man. And if you're playing these symbols, I think stopping for breakfast is something to consider. Award the Victor. Award the Victor's come back a lot because there's now a lot more form speed draw or ways of sort of abusing this card a bit more. It used to be that maybe you played the odd copy, or it was just you were trying to do the dirty infinite hardened barrage loop with All Might's mentorship. That's the one. But I think there's so many. There's now you've got the Chaos one diff that name escapes me, that form flips the draw and discard a card. You've got the final test if you're on order. You've got plenty of each, so you've got those other ways of drawing the card, and like your fail case on this is that you just sort of clear your progressive, which again is still strong. So I think Award the Victor has come back a little bit more in vogue and something to consider. And I think again you'll probably see it in those sort of chaos, good stuff style decks. And the last is a 5 diff foundation, right? It's a lot, but if you've got the life and fire symbols, like say an Amir, you can cheat this in, or you can sometimes just play it on a raw 5, like on turn 2 or turn 3. It's very strong if you're playing that ranged or Titan package. You've got the stuff to do with this, like there's a lot of crossover there. Just having the ability to possibly draw a card on every single attack on both your turn and your opponent's turn, and having a deadlock thing that it does. It's not the strongest, but like having it guaranteed, I just need this attack now is okay. But just having that ability to possibly draw a card on every single attack anyone plays the rest of the game is so strong if you can stomach that package of that range and Titan. So yeah, again, it's there are costs to playing this card in terms of I'm okay trying to resolve a 5 diff, and I'm okay playing a range or Titan package. But if you are like, this is so good and definitely worth it. So yeah, that's sort of 50 cards I pulled out. Obviously, there's going to be so many more in the format that I could have talked about, and there's ones I've almost certainly missed, or I've got stuff wrong talking about all these stuff. If there's any of my terrible opinions and takes that you agree with or don't agree with, obviously let me know in the comments, or beat me over the head with them at Nationals, because fingers crossed I should be there. I've got my hotel booked, so I'll be there at UK Nats. Hope to take that down, obviously, but we'll see. Either way, it should be a fun event. But yeah, so yeah, let me know in the comments what you think, whether there's any other cards I missed, whether I was wrong on any of these. And yeah, and obviously do all the usual things like comment, subscribe, all that stuff. It really helps the channel. And come and check out me and Brett chatting every Sunday usually on twitch.tv/UKversus, where we waffle endlessly about all things Universus, and where he's wrong about City Rampage and I'm right. But yeah. So yeah, thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll catch you next time.